This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
You are tuned in to the Foul Weather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
With all the ongoing anti-science chatter, the conspiracy theorists and those with their own interests in mind have been emboldened for sure. That has certainly bled over into the duck world. But we also just saw the conservation community come together and support science when the ducks needed it most. When the Prairie Pothole Region, the duck factory, when the duck factory was in jeopardy, when duck habitat once again saw a troubling trend, we came together and over 200,000 people supported the science and commented for the ducks. Today we digest and dissect how we talk science at the coffee shop, in the duck blind, and in the waterfowl science world. We also have an update on the coming El Nino and a hint at the weather for the coming season. We thank our every week listeners. You know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast episode each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. Think about that. You know where the ducks are at even before the ducks know where they are at. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the Foul Weather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. Some of you know, some of you do not, but my brother is the co-producer of the podcast. If it looks or sounds good, it's probably something he did. He's extremely talented, and I am forever grateful for him jumping off the bridge and joining me on this adventure of the Foul Weather Podcast. He's also the intro voice for the podcast, but mostly he saves me from my mistakes, I'd say regularly. That said, we're a great team, and I really appreciate his substantial contributions to the podcast. We usually do farm news and other ongoings of Dr. Mike in this segment, but what I keep replaying in my head is my brother and me hiking in the valley I grew up in Western New York. See, my father passed on April 1st of this year, and my brother came home to scatter his ashes with me a few weeks ago. We decided on the head of the valley in the brook trout stream where we lived for many years. Dad was a school teacher, but at night he ran coonhounds under the name Green Valley Kennels. He shot deer out the back window of the house. He killed turkeys in the valley under some of the first turkey permits ever issued in New York. He hunted local Canada geese before it really caught on with everybody else. I could go on, but I know this. He loved that valley, that trout stream, that visceral feeling of being in the woods. He loved that feeling we all have each time we are on the hunt. And he gave that feeling of the hunt to me. And I know we would not be here today talking to you about the science of duck conservation without him. Think about that and pass your passion on. My father is mostly why I'm a teacher, and it is likely why the podcast exists. He is why my brain can't let science go. He taught me to seek the best information available to help kill animals more efficiently and effectively and as humanely as possible. I probably read every outdoor magazine available during my teens. Dad always had a stack of hunting magazines. And when the original Duck Commander came out, he had the VHS tape before most. I tell ya, we wore that tape out together watching it. So my brother and I hiked and found the beginning of the 10 Mile Creek where we grew up. We placed his ashes in a pool that will flow south throughout America into the Allegheny, then down the Ohio, then the Mississippi, and eventually into the Gulf. Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. It is months until planting season, but your vision is already clear. The land is your passion, and Hancock Seed has your back. You plan food plots to feed and attract game in ways that matter for months. Live on your land with Hancock Seed. Today you plan, tomorrow you harvest. With Hancock Seed, you get family farm faith, nearly a century in the making. Hancock Seed has partnered with Foul Weather to produce 3 distinct seed blends. The Northern Deer Food Plot Mix, a proven combination that keeps deer coming all year round. The Southern Waterfowl Mix for carbohydrate-driven ducks. And the Northern Waterfowl Mix, built to succeed even in the toughest summers. Hancock Seed specializes from turf to plow and beyond. Find them today at hancockseed.com. That's hancockseed.com. We all know that feeling. Every waterfowl hunter knows the feeling. You're motionless in the marsh at first light, watching birds work the spread, hoping this season is as good as the last, hoping that the future has birds working the spread for generations to come. At the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, the mission is simple: to guarantee all Americans quality places to hunt and fish. For waterfowl hunters, that means safeguarding habitat and migration corridors and creating more places to hunt, so strong fall flights and good hunting opportunities aren't a thing of the past. As the nation's largest coalition of conservation groups, TRCP brings together hunters, anglers, and conservation partners to make sure the future of waterfowl hunting stays strong. Learn more today and join the TRCP by visiting trcp.org. Folks, a cool update from Beckman Game Calls coming at the end of this ad, so please stick with us. My friends across duck country, time to step up your calling with Beckman Game Calls. These beauties sound like a duck. Just have a listen. First, a real hen mallard, and then the Edison in the flooded timber of Arkansas. Beckman Game Calls with a lot of new colors and woods coming soon. Both the Edison and the Groundbreaker calls are adjustable to your air pressure, and the Groundbreaker is the first adjustable cut down on the market. Check out Beckman Game Calls today at beckmangamecalls.com. Quick note, my friends, before we move into the rest of the episode, as noted, Chris Beckman has a very exciting announcement. They are now offering a new call, the Conibear, his first adjustable Arkansas-style single reed. So check it out today. For those of you looking for a single reed, go grab yourself a Conibear today. As I like to say, the ducks can't escape it. Okay, and let's dive into the episode. First today, deep respect for all the Waterfowl podcasts regularly cranking out content. And my friends, we have gotten a lot of comments from our listenership, like how do you do it each week, and how do you come up with the quality content each week, and dang, Dr. Mike, you nailed it this week, or sometimes Dr. Mike, F you. Anyhow, we get those too. You know you're doing it right when it's hard, and people disagree sometimes, right? We try not to create division. We just report the information. Some people might not like it. That's fine. It's all a big discussion. But all of you that produce podcasts know that a lot of thought goes into each episode, and your concern for Duck Country USA is noticed. Your concern for Duck Country USA is noticed. The reason we have so many waterfowl podcasts nowadays is because people are really passionate about this stuff. And I will never consider that a problem. This week we cover, quote unquote, the conversation that we all have with Duck Country USA. We cover how the anti-science agenda has crept into the duck world and, in my opinion, soured the conversation. Healthy debate and questioning is warranted for sure, but it should be based on scientific evidence, and if not, then noted as a hypothesis. We shouldn't just make stuff up that sounds right, or we heard from someone else, but is maybe completely off the mark. It confuses the conversation and creates distrust of the great science that has made waterfowl conservation a success on this continent. To be honest, and many of you know this, but waterfowl science, conservation, and management is the envy of the wildlife conservation world. When you travel elsewhere, this success story is beyond reproach. It is unequaled. But we still have our challenges coming, and quality science is certainly the way forward. Let's start with a simple example here and within a context of current topics, and this would be a great way to start a conversation about maybe what's going on in the Prairie Pothole region. And here's how it goes. I hypothesize that drain tile in the Prairie Pothole region has reduced shallow wetland habitat needed by breeding ducks, and that the May pond counts are artificially high because ponds with drain tile nearby them dry up right after the BPOP survey happens, and therefore those May ponds don't actually reflect habitat available to ducks. That's a great testable hypothesis. It sounds really boring, right? And that's not how we talk, obviously, all the time. But mostly what we talk about is more hypotheses. We kind of state them as facts lots of times, but they're hypotheses, and a bunch of scientists right now are working on this specific thing, really to understand, are our May pond counts still reflecting what's available on the landscape for breeding ducks? And that would be a great way to start a discussion on a current topic of interest to duck hunters. But if we recall correctly from a while back, it was stated something like this. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service flies surveys and counts May ponds that then drain and are not actually available to ducks, and then those data are used in decision-making that keep us having a liberal season. So the surveys are wrong, and we can't have this many ducks. That's not science. That's some observation that hasn't been tested, but somehow is then stated as fact, and we let those people on a podcast, by the way. If we remember correctly, that conversation then was followed by some doom and gloom about how ducks are done for. It wasn't followed by how can we design a study to determine if drain tile on shallow wetlands is causing what people like to call paper ducks. We also discussed shooting hens a lot in the recent past and how that was the demise of duck hunting. Turns out the science shows that ducks die during breeding season, and increasingly hens are dying more than before on the breeding grounds. We should probably focus on that. For high reproducing ducks, those ducks that reproduce a lot when the conditions are right, I guess in ecological terms, they're called R-selected animals. This is nerd speak, so hang with me. In ecological terms, high reproducing ducks that, reproduce at an early age, don't survive much, etc. They produce a lot of young. They're called R-selected animals. They live short lives and reproduce fast. It's an aside here, but an American robin, for instance, is R-selected. Most live about 1 to 2 years. An old robin would be 5 to 6 years old. Instead, on the other side, a bald eagle is considered K-selected and can live 20 to 30 years of age. So how do we ensure as an animal that our genes are passed on? You take risks and produce a lot of young per year as an R-selected animal and you die young, whereas an animal like a bald eagle works to ensure its own survival, gets to reproductive age much later in life, and may only produce a few eggs per year, and sometimes not even every single year. In the end, the lifetime reproductive output of these animals is about the same. So they're just two different strategies to get to the same place. In waterfowl, we have the same thing, though. Most dabbling ducks are puddle ducks, our mallards, our teal, our gadwall, our widgeon, our shovelers, our pintail. They're on the R selection spectrum. Blue-winged teal probably being the most reactive to habitat in pushing the R selection envelope the most. Opposite are some Arctic geese and sea ducks that are more towards the K selection method of reproduction and why we tend to have somewhat restrictive seasons for them. But they're not nearly as strongly K selected as a bald eagle. If they were, I don't think we would even have the capacity to have seasons for them, or they would be insanely restrictive. That is a lot of information to state that folks that were sounding bells about hen mallard harvest were simply wrong. Well-intended, but not correct. Should we try to shoot more hens? Fuck no. Nobody supports that. Maybe that is culturally driven, but Drake mallards are a lot more plentiful, and they are big fat animals that taste great on the grill. So look to shoot drakes. But if we shoot a hen because it was the only duck that came in that day, or it was dark and we made a mistake out of a flock, or we just made a mistake out of a flock, don't feel bad. And we should not act like shooting hens drives the mallard population. We should stop wasting energy on conversations about harvest of hens. The true battleground is saving the breeding grounds. We just went through this potential assault on the Prairie Pothole region. And hopefully we now completely understand that that is the true battleground. And our efforts to save the Prairie Pothole region for sure are not one and done with a single social media comment. Second, how we talk about these hot conversation topics is really odd to me in the waterfowl world. I grew up in rural America, and I sat with my father in the coffee shop, at the pub, at camp, in the blind, and at home around the kitchen table. It's probably how I learned how to swear like a sailor, so I really apologize for the F-bomb. It just came out, but anyhow, it happens sometimes on here. But what I saw as a kid, and, my father did just this. He said something at the coffee shop that sounded important about a hunting season, a limit, wildlife habitat management. Pick your poison. And when he said it, he had confidence. There was me and 5 guys at the table. 4 of them just nodded their heads, maybe mumbled something like Boomhauer-ish, like from the dude from King of the Hill. And the 5th guy just sat silent, even though he knew my dad was full of shit. Dad had just spewed BS, but nothing happened. No discussion. And 4 out of 5 of those guys just went on to pass that bullshit on to the next person. Do the math. Bullshit travels fast, kids. The difference in the science world is that when you spew bullshit, it has consequences. The one that is not saying anything in that kind of coffee shop conversation tends to speak up. In the science world, we all respect our differences of opinion, our different hypotheses, and we thrive on challenging each other with the aim of making duck conservation better. And this is quicker than the coffee shop talk. We're not here to have a coffee and breakfast. The scientific process is built on hypotheses that must have a burden of proof. Proof is not, flooded corn is bad because I saw a thing on TikTok. Burden of proof is not, I heard a thing one day that convinced me about migration. Burden of proof is not, in my experience, ducks just show up at the same time each year. In the scientific world, burden of proof is a longer process. It is not the next best meme. It is not the next best social media post. It is not telemetry units on mallards in one part of the country that make you feel happy and comfortable with your world. Science is messy, and you need to recognize that. It is about probabilities of being wrong and refining information. The term "the science is settled" is reserved for laws in engineering or physical laws. They are settled, like gravity, in that the earth is round.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at Accenture.com/Spotify.
The new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire. The human postponer. They were the master of one phrase. I'll circle back on that. But 3 months later, you are the one doing all their work and wondering how big that circle is. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can take the hiring load off your plate. By automating the hiring busy work from the initial job post to scheduling interviews. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
A meme or a post showing the direction of ducks migrating on a map is only applicable to those ducks. That is not law. It is not the ultimate information. It has context, and everyone that posts such information should caveat their information as these data are restricted by XYZ. To act like every duck, for instance, from the boot heel of Missouri. Let me start that again. To act like every duck, for instance, from the boot heel of Missouri that was marked with a telemetry unit is the same as what all ducks do. Well, that's just absurd. What we need to measure and understand is if the ducks marked are what the ducks do that we see over our blinds. So what we need to measure and understand for the duck hunter is if the ducks marked are what the ducks do that we see over our blinds. For that, I call BS. Diving into a little telemetry stuff here. The Foul Weather podcast, I guess, has sat silent for some time on this subject. I think we had an episode that's like what telemetry does and does not tell us a while back. But remember, telemetry data only tells you about the ducks you marked, or at least the population you marked. If you only mark ducks on their wintering area and only from a few locations over a few time periods, then your information is biased. If you're trying to make comments about timing of migration, of course the ducks you marked last winter came back to the same area. There's substantial duh factor involved there, right? Duh. Of course ducks come back to the place they survived last year. But on most good production years, most ducks are juveniles and can't have telemetry units on them. So duh, the duck you marked on an area came back to the same area, and duh, most ducks can't be tracked if they just hatched this year. There's a lot that telemetry is not telling you. If you only catch ducks at your wintering area, then you do not have information about the new ducks that migrate into your area. You should at minimum mark ducks throughout a broad area north to south and across species. But we also must understand, at least for mallards, that an abundance of ducks remain north of a lot of folks marking ducks during the winter. The naivety, how naive the duck marking world is substantial and obvious even to the casual observer. The ducks you mark are only able to tell you about the population that you mark. All right. Of course, we speak from a high pedestal on this one, but we also understand that data analyses need to include reasonable assumptions about migration, migratory connectivity, and so on from GPS marking. These data are assumed to be non-biased by many, and in no way do I see most current projects solidly grounded in such methods, and I do not see them producing non-biased data. No matter if the folks marking ducks with GPS units and they're also confirming that with banding data, I guess to ensure the listenership that we're all good, we're fine. Okay, but I haven't seen a lot of that. The current posture of these folks suggests they are not willing to acknowledge biases and appropriately test them. That there are ducks to the north that are still coming south, and they haven't touched them. And those are the ducks that are probably over your blind on a daily basis. Because a lot of the telemetry I've seen says these ducks just fly from refuge to a safe place, refuge to a safe place, refuge to a safe place, and they don't get shot. Well, what the heck are we all shooting then? Because there's still people out there slamming ducks at times. I don't know. I think those are ducks from the north that move on weather, but that's me. I think there's time to put forward good hypotheses and still answer these questions. Anyhow, I'm rambling. Anyhow, I was recently told by someone that the Foul Weather podcast offended them as well because it publicly called out information provided on their podcast as BS. It was contextualized as, that is how you might do it in your neck of the woods, but not where I'm from. What? In our opinion, someone needs to get thicker skin. It also has nothing to do where someone is from. And also understand that to a scientist, hearing misinformation coming across my wavelengths is equally as offensive as being blunt in a conversation. Especially when people are available to consult to ensure you're not spewing BS. I'm not the guys at the coffee shop that accept bullshit or stay quiet. Science is about challenging each other and having information stand up to peer review and rigor. Yikes. So my comment is quit spreading fake news and the scientific community won't have to call you out. We also are not going to have guests on about flooded corn and then just nod our head when dumb stuff comes out of the mouth of that guest. That is why we have not had people on that are not experts in the field. That is just giving the corn conspiracy folks more airtime, and I certainly refuse to do that, even if it leads to better listenership and ratings. We will invite the Louisiana Corn Clown Car onto the podcast, but it would be a science-based conversation, and we would ask the hard questions. So I doubt they will ever accept an invite. I know that all sounds harsh, but the title of this episode is Duck Conservation is Driven by Science. But it could equally be I even got myself twisted up on my tongue. The title of this episode is Duck Conservation is Driven by Science, but it could equally be The Duck Conversation is Driven by Science. With an all-out assault on the duck breeding grounds for reasons that have not yet been revealed to us, we need to follow the science because the prairie pothole wetlands are important to humans just because they exist. They filter our water, they recharge our groundwater, they are a connected system with a significant nexus to larger bodies of water despite the currently poor interpretation of the Clean Water Act. The Prairie Pothole Region, this is what we care about, they produce ducks and other wetland wildlife and genuinely make life better on this planet. Wetlands everywhere in this country have been strongly damaged by the poor interpretation of the Clean Water Act. States may have quality wetland protections, but not all of them. If clean water is not a matter of national security, I don't know what is. The Clean Water Act needs to be strong at the federal level for national security. What we also need is a strong farm bill for conservation. Our legislators are failing farmers on that front. We need a strong farm bill for conservation. Not more rows of corn and soybeans that are already losing money because input costs are outpacing farm income. We need a strong farm bill that keeps up with inflation and finds ways to keep quality wildlife habitat with us. So let's follow the science. Let's speak up when we hear bullshit. Let's keep working towards refining our understanding of the ducks for the ducks and for the duck hunters. All right, let's end today with an El Nino update. I know everybody loves this one. We looked up the last 3 very strong El Nino events and posted images of departures from normal temperature and precipitation for the U.S. during the 3-month periods of October, November, December, and November, December, January. This is really a nice summary. It's on our Facebook page, I think. It's a while back now. We posted a lot of stuff about harvest and things. Y'all should really, if you've not been to our Facebook page, have a look. We've been cranking out what I think is really informative content for people. But the temperature and precip information is a nice summary that shows there's still variation with and amongst very strong El Nino years. So it's not a slam dunk, but there is a likelihood of warmer than normal temperatures, especially in the Mississippi-Nick flyways in the north, and the potential there is much, much greater. That said, our last very strong El Nino was pretty darn rough, with record temperatures in December for every single state in the Atlantic flyway and nearly all the states in the Mississippi flyway. It was the warmest December in 121 years, right? So that's not great for kind of duck business. It was also very wet throughout the month of December for most, but then January of the same winter was also only above normal temps for the northern tier states, whereas mid and southern latitudes were near normal temperatures. So I think it's a bit too early to get really into a full-blown long-term forecast. We also have to see how that October snow cover sets up in Siberia, because that has a strong effect on jet streams and the polar vortex throughout winter. La Nina and El Nino signals can be strongly impacted by other factors, including that polar vortex, right? I published a paper about 10 years ago with Dr. Judah Cohen. He's an MIT climatologist and director of seasonal forecasting and atmospheric and environmental research. That is a business. People pay them, businesses pay them. Like, let's say snowplow business says, man, how many parts am I going to need this year, right? Is it going to be a colder than normal or warmer than normal winter? Because you don't want to, as a snowplow company, produce a ton of parts if it's going to be warmer than normal, because plows aren't going to be used as much, and therefore you don't need as many parts. And here's the point. Think about this. This is the stuff I'm working with. Are these 100% correct forecasts? No. But businesses are paying big money to get a long-term seasonal forecast from one of the best people out there because it's right 75% of the time. And if you're right 75% of the time when you're trying to make parts, you're going to come out better than you would by just guessing. So anybody that says that none of these forecasts are worth shit, you're full of it. Because businesses know well enough to pay for long-term forecasts so they know whether they should make more parts. It saves them money, right? This is capitalism, folks. All we're doing in the weather severity index business is basically doing the same thing. I think we're right about, I don't know, like 80, 90% of the time. Maybe just say 75%. But it's better than zero. It's better than random chance. Anyway, when we published this paper with Dr. Cohen years ago, we found that the weather severity index in duck migration is strongly correlated to Arctic outbreaks during both La Nina and El Nino years. So Arctic air or polar vortex disruptions resulting, over the long term from the snow advance in October strongly modified the La Nina and El Nino signals. In fact, absent any influence of La Nina and El Nino, we found that the Siberian Snow Advance Index that was created by Dr. Cohen correctly identified if the weather severity index would be greater or less than normal with 75% accuracy. That is, it correctly identified if weather causing duck migration in November, December, and January would be milder or more severe than normal in 27 of the 36 years of our study. If I was a betting man, I'd take that bet for 10 years and win. Or, said another way, I'd make the right decision about my hunting trips or whatever I was going to do with habitat management 3/4 of the time. Anyhow, that is a way of saying, hold on, it looks to be a warm winter for most and wet in the south from Southern California over to Florida, but the nuances are important, and even a few good cold fronts can get ducks moving. We also have to consider that it is likely going to be the beefy ducks like mallards and black ducks, along with geese that hang up north. The likelihood of weather to push those other wimpy ducks south into mid and southern latitudes before the season begins is always a good bet. That said, I've been saying just run some good moist soil this year. Don't worry as much about the hot crops. Also, with the amount of rain coming, be sure to be mobile this year. Ducks chase those front lines of fresh water, hitting weeds, acorns, and bugs. So El Nino continues to develop, and we have a 100% chance of some type of El Nino at this point, with a very good chance of one of the strongest El Ninos on record. Stay tuned, my friends. More to come as the atmosphere sets up for the winter. All right, I guess El Nino is not my last thought. I got a little blue wing stuff here too. We've seen some information about a possible cold front in late August, specifically Friday the 28th of August, and that cold front could cause the blue-winged teal to fly south. Well, it kind of turns out the science on this one suggests that the average date of blue-winged teal leaving their northern areas is the 30th of August. Of course, there's some wiggle room around that date, but blue-wings are still primarily a photoperiod migrator. They may adjust some, but they primarily just leave the north because they act like a Baltimore Oriole or a scarlet tanager, leaving and arriving around the same time each year from their breeding grounds. Anyhow, more on how social media posts aren't always the greatest in our next episode. We might start doing something like the blind leading the blind with the word duck in parentheses ahead of the second blind. It's a double entendre, folks. Word meaning two things. The blind leading the duck blind. It'd be a portion of our episode where we help our good friends across duck country understand the real information by debunking some bullshit that we see on social media or we hear on a podcast. So stay tuned. Still hashing it out, but if you've seen some BS or heard some BS, just shoot it our way by email or through PM, and we will do our best to tackle it head on in the future episodes the rest of this summer and into fall. So, speaking of BS, no way should the teal season be shorter this year. Harvest doesn't drive teal populations. They are only with us for a short period of time. They use a strongly R-selected reproductive strategy of high energy use, high reproductive output, and short survival. The archaic teal season structure needs more science behind it. Unfortunately, the wisdom of the powers that be keep defunding the Office of Migratory Bird Management, so we don't have the people to run the models to get your teal season back up and running at the length that it should. In my opinion, it should probably just run the month of September or whatever people feel is appropriate without affecting their coming duck season. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.